Let's put on a manifold. Intake on. Time for the thermostat. The old one. I don't know, the bypass, or the bypass stuff was loose. This plate here, let me put that down so I can point. It's spring loaded, and what happens is as it warms up, the wax material, they call it a wax, in there expands, that pushes this up and opens this plate here on the top, and coolant can go to the radiator. Before it's open, these plates here are, or these holes here are open, so instead of going to the radiator, it goes through here and back into the water pump to recirculate to help the engine warm up quicker. So this is part of the reason you don't run without a thermostat, because there's nothing to stop that water coolant from going back into the engine without a thermostat. This faces up in there, so as this opens up, this plate here goes up too and covers up the bypass holes, so it can't go back through the engine and only goes to the radiator. And so that's kind of how it maintains temperature, is controlling how much goes to the radiator, how much goes back into the block. And there should be springs in there. Well, through some internet searching and cross-referencing, I was able to find the Gates part number for this thermostat. This plate here is not loose like it is in this one I took out. That can, I'm sure the flow of coolant, at least on one side, is pushing, it would push it, what is up when it's working, and block some of the bypass holes. Definitely not going like it should, so it needed replaced. These are not the cheapest thermostat out there. Most places have them for upwards of $100. I found this on Amazon. I'll put a link in and the description and up above or somewhere. But this is the Gates part number, the 33347. Let's flip this over. See how well, and all the bolts that I had so nicely in there fall out. Look, the old thermostat's going to hold up the housing. This sits down in, that's why there's rubber on the top here. It seals against there. This sits in this countersink, counter bore, and then your gasket. So it looks like it's gonna work. Oh, 170 degrees, I can just see it on there. I can live with that. So anyways, this run me basically 45 bucks through Amazon instead of the 90 to $100 I was seeing everywhere else. Had it in about a week. Definitely a big savings. Let's see, let's move the gasket. One thing to watch out for these, and I think it had to do with the thermostats for a while there, but some of them, this spring and assembly would hit the head when it was together. And when and it would only be up just a little bit or whatever, and so a lot of people wouldn't think nothing of it. And when you tighten that down, it just ruined the thermostat. It would bend it all around. It wouldn't work right, wouldn't open or stay open because it was bent around. It just depended on how you cranked it down. So they came out with a plate that's just it's about a 1/4 inch thick plate that goes in here. You put a gasket on each side of the plate, put your thermostat on top of the plate. That gives you enough clearance so this doesn't hit the head. That is not going to be an issue with this thermostat. Feels like there's no, when I get off to the edge here, it's not hitting the bottom and the housing tapers up. But this one looks like it's got a little bit shorter spring. Maybe they did some redesign. But something to watch out for so you don't ruin an expensive thermostat. And if you're wondering what these little wiggle doodads are, they do allow a small amount of coolant to go through, and by having these in there, they don't get plugged up. The coolant kind of keeps them wiggling because they're such a small hole. They don't get filled up with crud when the coolant gets dirty and block the passage, but that way a little bit of coolant can go through there so that sensing bulb warms up like it should. And also, probably more importantly, it lets the air out when you're filling up the cooling system. If this was totally sealed, you'd have an air pocket and it might not circulate, or the coolant doesn't touch in here because of that air pocket. The thermostat doesn't open, and the engine actually overheats even though everything's in place just because of an air pocket. So they do serve a purpose. See, one other thing is there's usually the bypass hose. Older Olivers, so 1600s, and some of them didn't. Late 1600s had this. The bypass was built into the head and came in. That's why you'll see a cutout in the block that goes kind of to nowhere. But the bypass came into this part right in here. Well, it was a smaller hole, and they found that guys that went out and just open up their tractors, you get your Super 88 out and go straight to work without letting it warm up a little bit. That's forcing a lot of coolant pressure through a small hole, and so the gaskets would tend to leak there, or you just didn't get good enough flow. So they redesigned it so it had this external hose. This is the one that was on it. I've got a brand new one. But what I am going to do is leave none on it, since this is a restoration. I really think they look sharp with the hoses still black and stuff like that. From the factory, they painted over. They weren't going to take that kind of time for that kind of detail. But I just like it. So I'm going to leave the hose off until after it's painted, which makes it a little more of a challenge, because it's going to be kind of tucked in there, but it's doable. It's easier if you have this off, if you have to change that hose, to change it then, because you can put it on there, slide this piece on top, clamp it down. But I guess we'll find out. Tune in for a future video. I'll get this gasket doped up and get that baby on there. You might be saying, well, what's this line for? It's a bubble bleeder. Yeah, bubble bleeder. Kind of like you can get air trapped in here, and that's why they have the little doodads in the thermostat. You can get air trapped in the water pump, and it won't pump air. It's just not designed to. and things can go bad. So they ended up adding on this. That just lets any air that's trapped up in here get out, goes up in and can go to the radiator. So not a huge important thing, but it's important, especially when you're filling up the first time the coolant system, changing, flushing, all that good stuff. I was getting confused for a moment there. I had the turbo return line. It looks similar to these two cooler lines, but the cooler lines on here are copper. I assume they're original, whereas the turbo return was steel. One thing I've noticed is they use what's called a vibro-lock fitting. It's a rubber ferrule that allows for vibration, or holds up better under vibration. But it can crush this copper down. It's a little tweaked down here at the end. So, but I'm thinking that with a little twisting and or adjusting on that, I can take that end off and still make this fit. The other end is really good shape. And let's see, how was this one? That ain't too bad. And that end is good. So I think I'll just do this one and see if I can make it work. Got it to fit. A little tweak in there. Has a slight angle to it now, but filter still fits in there. Look, if I do like this, now it's straight. But it won't interfere with the filter. We're gonna like it. I got these replacement barrels, whatever you want to call them, from MSC. Agco wanted 13 bucks a piece for them. MSC was a little over 4, so that's kind of no-brainer, even with the shipping. It has a number, but if you look for a vibro lock ferrule, F-E-R-R-U-L-E, you're sure to find them online. Save a few bucks. Maybe you got a store near you that handles that stuff. You can pick them up. Well, I found where I hid my new hose. I just wanted to prove to myself I could get it on there. That's why there's no clamps. I'm going to take it back off because, like I said, I don't like to paint the hoses. I think it sets them off, but also seems like the paint eventually starts flaking off the hoses. And then they look, yeah. Little details make the difference on a good restoration. There's your number for the bypass hose, 168 494A, made in Turkey. Let's look in this filter housing over, and God, it's had some heat put to it. I can feel where it's like squished out there. It's been torqued down in its life. So fortunately, the parts engine I've got had a good canister on it. I cleaned that up, but a nice even bottom, so it should seal well. Nice flat top for the crush washer to crush against. So we're gonna use that. I've got my Wix 51842. The AGCO number is 156149AS. I don't know if they're directional anymore. They always used to say up and down, but I don't see anything. I would say this is up, because the downside has to mate up with this inner ring so it seals decent. So usually that end's flat and the top side ain't as stiff. These feel stiff on each end, so maybe they decided that was the better way to go. But the filter has to conform to the top of the can. That's how the top end of it seals up. And then the bottom end touches on the base. So I'm going to put this end down, but feeling it, I don't think it really matters like it used to. Putting the filter base back on, and of course that was set up for not having a fuel pump. So in is down here, which went right to the fuel tank, and out is here. That's not going to move because that goes to the injection pump. But now tank is going to have to go over to the fuel pump, and then fuel pump out to here, back to the filter. So I think to make that a better shot, instead of having to come around and everything, I'm going to move this port over to this port. They're both ins, both marked in. So trade those two, and then all I got to do is make a line that comes over and elbows in here at the pump. That shouldn't be too difficult to make. A lot less bends than fishing it all the way around over here. Or maybe I can even find one. Well, that was my last drain cock. So I guess I better add that to my shopping list for Corvus Oliver, to add more of these. And there's probably other stuff too. Oh, temperature sending unit. I believe a fuel tank sending unit. Yeah, I better write this stuff down because I'll forget. This is an old one I had in the shelf, but it might work, but put it in there for now to keep the hole plugged and forget about it, and then wonder why coolant's leaking around it because I didn't tighten it with any sealant. Well, there it is. This is about as far as it's going to get while still being on the motor stand, engine stand. I'm leaving the exhaust manifold off because I want to paint that up. I do believe it's supposed to be silver, not green like the rest of the tractor, but I need to look into that a little more. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it off because of paint. It won't take nothing to put that back on and finish up the fuel system, but can't get the flywheel on until it's off the stand. Can't put the turbo on until there's an exhaust manifold. So she is about as far as she's gonna get. I can finish up some of this fuel plumbing. But as always, I appreciate everybody watching, commenting, following along. It's nice to finally see it looking like an engine again. Who knows how long it'll be before I actually fire it up because, well, like I said, paint. But we are headed in the right direction. Stay tuned.